Firstly, I guess I'm what you call a sensitive. I regularly see things, hear things, and feel things that others don't. I'm usually the first one to point out when something doesn't feel right, and I've been like this all my life. During my first year at university, I stayed at Hillhead Halls, and I had the strangest experiences. For about the first month of being there, it was fine. One day, I was walking about the kitchen, and I felt a huge blast of cold and loud whispering, which really frightened me. Seeing strange things doesn't usually bother me, because it happens quite regularly, but this really bothered me, because it felt so bad. I asked my flatmate if she had heard anything, but she said that she hadn't. Just after the Christmas holiday, I came back to the worst time of my life. Firstly, there was a man walking around my flat. He was very tall, wearing all black, including a black hat or hood, and you could not see his face. I saw him outdoors and inside the flat. He frequently had a black dog with him, which often walked by my bedroom door. My flatmate got really scared of being alone in her room, as she felt there was someone watching her from her door. It was about a week after seeing this man that electrical appliances in my room started to go wrong. My electrical alarm clock, for example, would just start to beep much louder than anything it ever done before, and did not stop when I pulled the plug out. It has no battery backup. My printer would just print out random rubbish, even if it was not switched on, and light bulbs will blow if you looked at them for a long time. The electrical stuff would only happen in my room. Objects would disappear from my room, reappearing elsewhere in the flat. An example of this is that we lost a bread knife out in the kitchen, bearing in mind that I don't eat bread much, especially not in my bedroom. We found it on top of my wardrobe at the back, about 3 or 4 months after it got lost. At night was the worst. Me and my flatmate would drag our mattress through to my room and sleep there because we're too frightened to sleep in separate rooms. I would have the most horrendous nightmares, which I never got before and have never got since. At night there would be constant bangings, tappings, and scrapings, which sounded like they were coming from the space between the walls. I think about the worst thing that I experienced while living there was getting up one morning and walking to the window at the end of the landing and looking out at the trees that are above the river dawn. On the larger branches, there were hanged people, as in dead, with a rope around their neck, swinging in the wind. They weren't dressed in modern clothing. I wanted to run away and stop seeing it, but maybe I was too frightened because my feet wouldn't move and I found it really difficult to breathe. After this, my flatmate found staying in her room, which overlooked the river dawn, unbearable, and moved into the room next to mine. As soon as that room was locked, everything was fine, until it came to the end of the year, and she moved out. She moved out about a fortnight earlier than me, but I was spending most of my time in the flat above mine. After her moving out, I came downstairs from upstairs to find her door open and light shining through onto the landing carpet. Very bravely, I went to shut the door and switch the lights off, but just as I got there, the door slammed in my face and locked, and I heard the light switch off. I phoned my flatmate to make sure she was home, which she was. I then phoned the people from upstairs and asked them to come down, and when they got to my flat, the room wasn't locked again, but was totally empty and freezing cold. It was the summer, but you could see her breath was white. The next day when I got out of the shower, I found that the bathroom door was wide open, despite the fact that I'd locked the door and there is no way that the lock could open itself. Also, the bathroom door was very creaky, and I hadn't heard a creak. I went to my room and got dressed as quickly as possible, but I couldn't find the key to my room so I could lock up and leave. I'd left the key in the lock on the outside of the door, but it was gone. I found it in the bathroom sink. Finally, one night, I gave my key to one of the people living upstairs to go and get me a sweater for my flat, as I was too frightened to go down. This person, who was a complete skeptic, came back upstairs completely pale, sweating cold sweats, shaking, and totally out of breath. I don't know what happened, because this person won't talk about it, and has made us all promise never to bring it up in conversation. These all sound like really weird events, but I don't smoke, drink, or do any kind of drugs, and I didn't then, but I swear they are all true. I don't want to experience anything like that again as long as I live. Thanks for letting me share this with you. My friend and I went to Alabama during our senior year in high school to visit my grandparents. Now, my grandparents lived in the middle of nowhere, little town. You blink, you miss it. Anyway, there wasn't much to do, so one day we went exploring. Down about a half mile from my grandparents' house, at the end of the road, was a huge pasture. It hadn't been inhabited or cared for years. There was a large gate with a no trespassing sign. This made us curious to see what was hiding back there, in the middle of nowhere. We crawled under the gate and started walking. There was a gravel path and nothing else but trees, grass, and insects. We kept going for about a mile until we were in a fully wooded area. This is where the strangeness happened. First off, we stumbled across an old graveyard with only about 3 graves in it. Looked like a family. The tombstones were dated back to the early 1800s. I took photos that I can send at a later date if you'd like. Across from the graves was a waterfall. We decided to sit and take in the sight. While sitting there, we heard horse hooves galloping closely. We turned and saw nothing. A little while later, we heard what sounded like something being swung through the air near our heads. Nothing visible though. It spooked us, and we decided then that we should probably head back to the house. On the way back, we heard the horse hooves again, and this time we ran, got back to my grandparents' house, and replayed our story to my grandfather. This is where it gets spooky. He said that a while back, he stumbled across the waterfall too, and decided to sit and fish at the bank. He heard the horse too, and heard the swinging, which he described as a hatchet or something similar. Only he said that he turned and he saw a man on a white horse, carrying a machete, and appeared to be clearing the fields, but it wasn't really there, like he and the horse were transparent. He said that's when he took off running too. The only thing I can think of is that at one time, someone lived on that land, which is why they were buried there. I can tell you one thing, it spooked me then, but now I just realize that people just stayed there where their home was. I haven't had any opportunities to get back to that area, but if I do, I may go visit them. I moved to Indiana in 1986. I befriended a woman who sold real estate and said she knew of this huge house that was for rent in a small town called Lamb, Indiana. It sits directly across the river from Carrollton, Kentucky, and is halfway between Vevey and Madison, Indiana. The house was absolutely fabulous, made of stone and built circa 1800. It is told that the Native Americans taught a white man how to build the house. It became part of the Underground Railroad during the Civil War. There was a tunnel built from the Ohio River up to the basement wall, where they had knocked a hole in the wall for slaves to enter. My story starts in the fall of 1987, when my mother, my dog, and I were on the first floor in the living room, watching television. My little dog ran upstairs and was running around in circles. I could hear little toenails on the wooden planks. I felt a cold chill, like a burst of cold air, and became puzzled by it. There were no doors or windows open in the house. It was cold out, and we had built a fire in the wood stove. I went up to check on my little dog to see what she was doing, and there it was. My room had a door that led out to nothing. I assumed there was a balcony at one time, but at this time, there was no evidence of one, so the door stayed shut and locked. When I had gone upstairs, I noticed the air was more frigid, and it seemed windy. I went to my room and the door was standing open, and it looked as though a small child had breathed on the window of the door and wrote Amy's room on the window. I think the most interesting experience in this house also happened to be the most terrifying. One night, I had been sleeping in bed with the door open when I was awakened by what I thought was my dad. I remember the door squeaked open slowly, and I heard a whisper. I couldn't hear it too clearly. All I knew was that it was some sort of talking. That's when I started to open my eyes slowly and saw what appeared to be a nun with an axe on her head, kneeling down and praying in front of my bed. I screamed. My parents rushed into the room, and I told them I saw something. My dad did his best to reassure me that everything was okay, and after I explained what had happened to me, I feel like he was just as creeped out as I was, even though he tried not to show it. Well, that even frightened my dad, to the point at which he told me he couldn't sleep the rest of the night. I ended up falling asleep, and my dad stayed up. He told me he went to the bathroom and turned on the light, when all of a sudden, it went out. Needing to use the bathroom, he grabbed one of the flashlights we had. When he shined the flashlights towards the mirror to wash his hands, he looked at the mirror for a second, only to notice an old man's face right behind him. He only saw this for a few seconds, but he couldn't forget the man's face. He had 3 large gashes on the side of his face, like he had been mauled by a tiger. Claw marks. He was a balding man, with gray hair only on the side of his face, and he looked about 70s. Of course, when the bathroom light came on, there was nothing there anymore. The basement had some creepy occurrences as well. You would hear a very young voice, often singing softly, not super loud. In fact, very faint, but a voice was there. When he'd get downstairs and into the basement, you wouldn't hear it anymore, but it was always something you heard whenever you were in other parts of the house. About a year or so later, we had some family staying with us for the weekend, and my cousin set up a large tape recorder in the basement to see if there were any noises. My little nieces and 3 friends bedded down in the living room by the wood stove to stay warm, and we all went to bed. The next morning, one of the little girls thanked my dad for stocking the fire that night because it was getting kind of chilly. My dad hadn't been downstairs all night. My cousin went down to the basement to get the tape recorder, reel to reel by the way, brought it back upstairs, and played it back to us. You could vividly hear a little girl say "Mommy." My family lived in that house for almost 15 years. This is a wonderfully chilling and rather classic, if that can be said, Scottish tale ghost experience. My mother, who was attending university in St. Andrews, Scotland, was walking home from a party. It was about 11 o'clock on a chilly November night. It should be noted beforehand that St. Andrews was, centuries ago, the religious capital of Scotland, and the ruins of the great cathedral still stand in the middle of the town. Anyhow, she decided to take a shortcut to the dorms. Instead of taking the road, she began to make her way through the soccer pitches. These were surrounded by spinneys of trees. As she crossed the fields, she noticed what appeared to be 3 policemen at the road at the end of the pitch, where she was heading. Though not that close, she could see that they wore heavy clothes, like the Scottish policeman's coats traditionally worn in the winter. She didn't want to be found by them at that late hour, and went to the nearby trees to hide. To her chagrin, they began to move towards the center of the field, though not directly at her. She stayed put. As they came closer, she realized that they were walking on the air, about 3 feet above the ground. Furthermore, they were not policemen, but monks in clerical robes. 2 of them were supporting a third in the middle, who seemed to be wounded. They passed only a few yards away from her, so that she saw them very clearly. Oddly, their feet moved very slowly, but they were moving through the air very quickly. When they came about parallel to her, my mother, mad with fear, ran as fast as she could back to the dorms, clearing a fence that was as high as her, with one leap on the way. A violent wind kicked up against her as she ran, as if trying to blow her back. The next day, she went back to where it happened. At the very spot where the 3 monks had passed near to her, she found 3 black cats eating the carcass of a rabbit that they had just killed. In another note, the mystery as to why the apparitions were floating is easily solved. The ground was leveled in order to make a proper playing field. The monks were simply walking on their own terrain, as it would have been in medieval times, 3 feet higher than the leveled field. My family has had many paranormal experiences. When my mother was a child, they purchased a house near Martins Ferry, Ohio, that had some strange occurrences there. My uncle was in his room asleep, and woke up in the middle of the night to find an old woman in a rocking chair sitting in the corner of his room. He said she told him to get out of her house. My uncle was so frightened, he literally dragged his mattress into my mother's room and refused to ever sleep in his room again. My mother-in-law also saw the woman and can vouch that she was real. My great-grandmother would also see a small black devil-like creature with glowing red eyes outside her window at night. None of my family's pets lived very long in that house either. Their fish were found dead in their tank one morning. All of them. Here's the thing though. The water was somehow boiling hot. My mother's hamster was found dead in its cage too, and I've been told it looked like something had maybe scared it to death from the expression on its face. Also, every night, my grandmother would dream that the house was on fire and they couldn't get out. After living in the house for 6 months, they moved out. The day after they had moved out, the house caught fire and was almost burned to the ground. To this day, my aunt still has ghost experiences. At one of their old houses, they would turn out all the lights, lock the doors, and would come home to find that every light in the house was on. I never felt comfortable being alone in the house upstairs. I would feel like someone was watching me when there was no one else upstairs. And in the house they live in now, they were in bed one night when they heard a blood-curdling scream coming from their living room. They ran into the living room to find nobody there, and all the doors in the house were unlocked when they knew that they had been locked before they went to bed. Also, my aunt was in bed, and someone told her that her baby's daughter's face was covered by her blanket, but no one else was home. I swear this is absolutely the truth. I wanted to share my family stories with other people, so they can know that maybe they are not alone out there. Hello, my name is Naomi, and I've had several paranormal stories to share. Ever since I was young, I've always been terrified of the paranormal, and I have had terrifying, vivid dreams. As a child, I would frequently awake to see a dark, shadowy figure standing by the doorframe of my bedroom. I would feel a presence behind me when I would walk upstairs at night. At a slightly older age, I dismissed the possibility of ghosts because I figured it was impossible, but later I had a change of heart when I went to this haunted yard. I'd heard many stories about a small yard where strange things had occurred. One night, I thought it might be interesting to go take a look at it and see what all the fuss was about. The yard is almost impossible to find, totally surrounded by trees. If you are able to find it, go there in winter. The snow is always perfect, not a single flaw. If it's a windy night, there will be no wind within the yard. The freaky part about it is that there is an old building which used to be an insane asylum, now abandoned. It's boarded up, but one night we opened it up, and we heard a faint barking of dogs from within, but there were no dogs anywhere nearby. Next to it, there is a small trailer. No one lives in the trailer, but a light and the TV are always on. There is an old swing on the yard. If you watch it for long enough, it will begin to swing slightly. The strangest part is that there are 2 old Native American tombstones. Every time you go back, they've been redug and moved to another location on the yard. I'm not sure if any of this is ghost related, but it certainly is freaky. An incident happened to me this evening as well. I was walking with some of my friends along the railroad tracks in my town. On the street next to the tracks, 100 years ago, there was a man who went insane, killed his family, and was hanged in the courtyard. Anyway, tonight, as we were walking, we all of a sudden simultaneously stopped and looked at each other terrified. We all felt a strange presence brushing against our backs. Later, we were sharing stories about screams people frequently hear coming back from the park. We decided to sit out on the deck of my friend's house, who lives right by the park. We were just sitting around, talking, when we hear the scream of a little girl, as if she was being murdered, coming from across the park. We randomly ran inside. Once inside, we began to share ghost stories. One of my friends believes his house is haunted. He always feels things in his room when he is sleeping. With one particular experience, back in winter, he would wake up in the morning with claw marks in his shirts and slight scratches on his back. This happened about 6 times. Another time, he woke up and all of his blankets were totally flipped upside down, but looked as though they had been untouched. He talked to his grandmother about it because she is able to communicate with the dead, and she visited their house and told the spirits to leave. Since then, there have been no strange occurrences. Hey guys, it's PhantomOfDarkness here, and I just wanted to say, and you guys get a blood-curdling scream, and you guys get a blood-curdling scream, you get a blood-curdling scream, you get a blood-curdling scream. We all get blood-curdling screams on this great narration of a channel with ghost stories alike. Yeah. Anyway guys, I'd really appreciate it if you gave this video a like and shared and subscribed if you haven't subscribed yet. We are moments away from 24K. So if you haven't subscribed yet, if you haven't shared this video yet, do your best to share this video all around so we can celebrate, and we're less than 60 subscribers away, so let's do this. Yeah! I don't know why I'm so excited. Well, I should be excited, right? No, I'm happy for you guys in the end. Anyway, guys, I gotta go, but seriously, thank you so much for supporting the channel. It really means a lot to me, and I'll see you in the next video. And leave a like, because I forgot to say that. Oh, actually, I pretty much did say it. I'm leaving now. Bye. Love you.